What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? I'm super excited to share with you kind of my process of what I've done the last many years on how I kind of think about and plan for and prepare for the new year.
Ooh.
And we got quite a few people joining us. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and just maybe mute your mic for the time being. There is some interactive parts I want to chat with you guys about. Now, the reason this is super important to me. And the reason I decided to do this now instead of like January is why? Well, you guys probably want to know what to do or like what your plan should be starting in the new year. So obviously we were thinking about this ahead of time, right? So I want to kind of walk you through. This is a three-part class. We have another class, second class next week, same time, same place, and then the following week as well. So there's three pieces to this. And the first one is what we're going to go over today. I know some of you guys have done lots of like vision setting exercises. Maybe you've spent time thinking about what you want. And as Nick said at the beginning of this, you have some good intentions, but you just go off and kind of fall off the rails. And there's I forget the statistic, I probably should have looked it up, but there's a statistic that shows how many people, I think it's like the third week of January, most people have already broken their New Year's resolutions. Now, if that's most people, you guys here, you're not most people. You are above average. You are extraordinary, right? So we're going to talk through this. Obviously, each one of these has a little bit of homework, things you got to think about. I can't plan your life for you, unfortunately. I don't know what's important on a basic level or rudimentary level for each of you. So we're going to go through and talk about this. Now, I always like to throw out an interesting question, which I will do here to kind of get the ball rolling, right? Most people are like, what do you want your life to look like? Most people are like, I don't know. And some of you, I know you, some of you more personally, some of you on this call, and I know that some of you have just spent most of your life like in kind of like in survival mode, right? You're like just barely trying to make it to the next day. And you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't really ever stopped to think about what do I want to do next year or next week or, several years in advance. So here's my challenge question here on the screen is if you woke up tomorrow and you had $1 million in your bank account, what would change in your life? Now there's four. Now obviously this is you can go a whole bunch of different directions. Obviously with the $1 million, you're not buying your private plane, right? So we're like limiting this. I guess you could buy a used one, but you're not buying a $70 million jet, obviously, right? But for most people, $1 million would be fairly life changing, right? You had $1 million in your bank account. So I kind of have four different areas that we're going to focus on just to kind of point you and kind of get you going in a certain direction. And the idea here is I want you guys to be thinking about each of these four areas. What are some things that you would like to see different for the next year or next many years, right? So your health, your lifestyle, relationships, finances, career, and small business. So let's think about each one of these just a little bit more. Let's jump in. So when it comes to health and lifestyle, would you invest in a personal trainer, take up a new hobby, prioritize maybe prioritize your health, right? What are some things that you guys can think of? Throw it in the chat. What are some things that you guys can think of that you would do to improve your health or your lifestyle? Some of you guys may not know this, but there's people here in this room who have lost massive weight, made a huge difference, made some pretty small lifestyle changes that made a big impact, big difference. But what are some things you guys can throw in chat? What are some things that you guys would do if, again, we're asking the question, what would you do if you woke up with $1 million in your bank account? What would you do different? Now, some of you guys might actually give me some answers like, well, maybe then I joined the gym. Well, here's a challenge question number two. Do you have to be a millionaire to join the gym? Like, right? In my world, in the software business where I'm from, we used to call those dependencies. That like, I can't do this until that happens. Well, most of you who are struggling maybe with trying to get your life aligned with maybe the vision you had, most of you probably have some kind of dependencies that you've created for yourself. I can't do this until that. Like, I can't have friends over until I renovate my entire house, right? That's a dependency. That's something you're creating, an obstacle you're putting in front of yourself It's not really there. You're just putting it there, right? I can't join the gym unless I'm a millionaire, right? So what are some things, if you guys can throw in chat here, I'm going to read through some of these. Have time, work out, take time for myself. So Corey, can you do that? Can you do that right now? Or do you have to have $1 million? Kyle would play more golf and try to relax more instead of work, work, work. Okay. So maybe Kyle, that would be maybe I think what you're all saying is you really want more of this financial independence, right? And what I've learned, financial independence really means different things to different people, right? It definitely does. Let's see. Feel like my life is pretty good. I would travel a lot, travel more, and I travel a lot. So you would 2x your 2x your travel plans, fell on maybe 3x, 5x, 10x. Love it. What are some other things? Get rid of your W-2, hopefully, Cassie. Okay. Yep. Makes sense. What are some other things you guys would do when it comes to health and lifestyle? I actually took advantage of a Black Friday sale, and I actually have a new gym in my garage. I have to put some things together. That's something I decided I want to do next year. I'm like, I don't have to wait till January. Let me take advantage of Black Friday sales, right? So, kind of getting a little head start here. Okay, those are some great starts. Now, um, what about your relationships? Would you spend more quality time with loved ones, travel with family, give back to your community? Like, what would you do on the relationship level? Now, some of you guys know our kids are grown up. They're 22, 20, almost 22 and 23, grown up out of the house, right? They're on their own, but I'm in a different place than some of you guys who have maybe some toddlers at home, right? So some of you guys may just want to say, hey, you know what? I want to have maybe a date night with each of my kids once a month, or maybe once a month you pick one of them, have some kind of rotating schedule where you're spending time one on one. Obviously, you don't have to have $1 million to do that, but I want you guys to start thinking a little differently. Because in our third class, we're going to talk, or the second or third class, we're going to talk about how the things you're doing now, do they align with what you want or the current life you have? That's a big difference, right? So imagine as some of you guys are like signed up to run a marathon. I know Anthony Jones here loves running as much as I do, which is not very much at all, right? But obviously, if you're training for a marathon, if you're doing something, that's very different than a 5K, right? The distance is very, very different. It's the difference between 3.1, 3.2 miles and 26.6 miles. Very, very different. But guess what? Every single thing you want to do in life requires some kind of commitment and some kind of start, right? You got to start somewhere. So, what are some things you would do with friends? Let's see. I travel more intensely, spend more time with family and friends than I do now. Consider starting a business. Nice, good start. What else for relationships? Our family, because our kids are grown up, Santa's spoiler alert, their kids have figured out the whole Santa thing. And so when you have 21 and 23-year-olds, you can't surprise them with gifts too much anymore, right? And living on their own, have their own life. So what did we do? Well, we wanted to have kind of annual Christmas trip. So literally in 2 weeks, we're going to go on a fun trip. We're going to go somewhere that we haven't been before. And I'm not talking about, it doesn't have to be anything super elaborate. We are going to Hawaii, but it doesn't have to be expensive, right? But again, it's intentional. So instead of spending a lot of money on gifts, we're going to create some shared memories. Now, that is very intentional, right? And as our kids grow up and have their own families, we're going to have more reasons to try to get them to come back and visit mom and dad, right? So let's see, what else? What are some other ideas for relationships that you guys can think of? Just some bullet points. What are some things? Um, so travel, definitely travel more together. When you have that dedicated time together, it makes you closer. Absolutely. Absolutely. What are some other things, relationships? Because the relationships are multifaceted, right? Not miss child events because of work, spend more time with parents, like to help people. So like okay, sure. Help with some projects. Yeah. So you're talking about like volunteering, Anthony, spend time. Yep. Spend time with family, mom, dad. Yep. Now again, back to my second question. Do you need to be a millionaire? for any of these things? The answer is no. But that million dollar question kind of starts getting some ideas moving, right? And the reason I want you guys to share some of this here in class is maybe your idea might trigger someone else. Maybe someone else has a similar idea as well. Money stress would be less or eliminated. Sure. Yep. A lot of people say, hey, I want to be able to walk into any store and not have to look at the price tag. Most of you guys don't know this, but you can do that now. Anyone heard of Dollar Tree? You can go and get whatever. Everything's a dollar, right? So everyone on this call who has the internet can do that. But I promise you, that's not a big deal. That's like a one-time moment in time. That shouldn't be like your big vision. Walk into any store and not look at the price tag. Like it's a thing. You're going to buy something. It's going to, you know, it's going to wear out. It's going to go down in value, whatever, right? It's not a humongous thing that everyone. That's like the answer that you say because you repeat it because you hear other people say that, right? Okay, what about your finances? What would you do with the money? Depending on how old you are, probably won't last the rest of your life, especially those of you in your 20s, 30s, maybe 40s. $1 million may not necessarily last until you're 80 or 90. What would you pay off? Would you invest? What would you invest in? What would you save for? Like, what would that look like? That's kind of what we're trying to do. And what I want you guys to do is start thinking about bullet points for now, right? We're going to eventually kind of convert those to paragraphs or things that are a little bit more clarified, right? What are some things you would do with, what about finances? $1 million in your bank account. I asked this question to a guy who had this is years ago. And he had this beat up car. I said, what would you do if you had $1 million? And he looked at his car. He said, I get my car painted. I'm like, poor guy doesn't have much of a vision to get his car painted with $1 million. Why don't you buy a new car? Like, do something. Right? What are some things with finances that you would do? Would you buy a business? You'd stop spending as much time in your budgeting app. David, I promise you, you still probably want to use budgets even if you had $1 million because it will go quick. The reason I'm asking this exact question, there's several reasons, but I used to work with a guy used to work for me rather. He ran one of my departments in my software company. He oversaw the tech support department, and you guys may have heard me tell the story before. But his mom won like $1 million and he came in the next day to work. He was just super excited. He was like, I've never seen a dude more excited. He's kind of just mellow and he was like amped up on Mountain Dew kind of all the time excited. And a few years passed and I said, how's your mom doing? She won that $1 million. And he looked down at the ground and he was sad. And you could tell it in his body language. He said, she's back to bouncing checks again. $1 million, right? It just went a few years, 2 years, she'd spent it all of it. And then she had some debt from it, right? So again, $1 million isn't going to last forever, right? Especially if you just spend it, it's going to go down pretty quick. Down payment for rentals, okay, like rental, like Airbnbs, Corey. There's some people on here actually that are doing Airbnbs I know of. Yep. Okay. Maybe buy a business. Have you guys ever thought? I know several of you have talked about buying a business as right? Maybe you would, I don't know, there's all kinds of things you could do. Maybe invest in real estate. I know we got a couple of real estate investors in here on this group. Okay, let's talk about number four. Or I'm sorry, number four, the small business. What would you do for a career? Right? $1 million, you need to make it make money for you, right? So some of you guys were on a call that I did back in July. We were talking about real estate investing without being a landlord. And they don't teach you this in high school. And the idea is you take a chunk of money and you make it go get a job. The money gets the job. The money goes, earns money, and then comes back maybe a few years later, double or triple than when it started, right? And that's the kind of thing that you have to think about. You have to be intentional. You have to make some investments, right? It doesn't mean you want to give your crazy brother-in-law money for his random idea for starting a business, or that's a very high risk, kind of, especially if you have zero experience starting businesses or zero success in general, right? So what are some ideas for that you guys would start? Small business. I have a very big idea of something I want to do next year. It's going to take a lot. So I'm sizing that up myself right now. What are some passion projects? How many of you guys have ever wanted to write a book? Anybody? What about um, give a TED talk? Anthony Jones, I know he wants to complete a full distance Ironman, right, Anthony? Well, the reason I'm saying all this, ladies and gentlemen, is a lot of things that I've done, big things in my life, started with a bullet point on this list, this exact list. Okay. And a few years ago, actually 2 years ago, I got to um, I got to do this swim bike run, also known as a full distance Ironman. How many guys, when I said health, you immediately thought Ironman sounds awesome? In case you're not familiar with this, it took me a few hours. And when I say a few, I mean 14 hours to complete. You have to swim 2.6 miles. You bike this one actually slightly different distance. This was 116 miles, and then run 26.2. Now, when I tell people, hey, who wants to run Ironman? How many people raise their hand, you think? What percentage of people raise their hand? Go ahead and type it in chat. Nick says he would love to. Today's opposite day. Svelana would love to. Yep. Would not love to. Most people say I'm not in shape for that, right? Or it doesn't sound like fun. That's the two top reasons I hear. Why would I do that? It doesn't sound like fun. Well, does everything in your life have to be fun? Or could this be like medicine, health? You're kind of investing in something. And I promise you, once you start doing the workout plans, it don't matter whether you're in shape. You will be by the time the event comes, by the time you start working on the actual event itself. Okay. So let's talk about this. What are some things specifically we could do when it comes to lifestyle? Could you maybe spend less on fast food, more on some better quality foods? That's something you could do. Obviously, you don't have to be a millionaire, but we're just getting in the right direction. Hire a personal trainer for those of you who like the accountability, someone to kind of kick you in the behind the rear end to kind of help you on keep you on track, right? Check in with you. You can there's fitness clubs, all kinds of events, yoga retreats, all kinds of things you can go to. What about a new hobby? That's Iron Man there for Anthony. Golf. Some of you guys love golf, skiing. I should have put snowboarding in there. That's what I prefer. Martial arts, all kinds of stuff. Jiu-jitsu, whatever, right? There's tons of things that you guys have some interest in that you could start thinking about. Again, the idea here is to start with some bullet points on what you want to do different. Okay. Mental health resources. I'm actually looking into more mindfulness programs. I actually had to look up the definition of mindfulness. I met a mindfulness coach last year. And I'm like, after I left from talking with her, I'm like, what does a mindful coach do exactly? So I had to look that up. What about this? This is what I just am going to do this weekend. Set up a home gym, join fitness club, right? All kinds of things you can do when it comes to health or lifestyle. So Svelani, you're adding to, you're expanding. So pretty soon, Svelani, you'll be charging people to come use your gym. That's what I'm hearing. And you won't die. You promise you won't die. You may feel like it, but you won't. Okay, what about relationships? Let's dive into that a little bit more. Spend more quality time with loved ones, the shared experiences. Remember, I said we're actually going to go on a trip. We're going to Maui this over Christmas, right? What are some other things you could do? It doesn't have to be that. It could be maybe obviously invite the family you want to spend more time with, right? Host some gatherings. So those of you love hosting parties, family reunions, not have to worry about the costs, right? That's pretty cool. What about help friends and family financially? Now, I will tell you, I've done this for a while, and I have this caveat just because of a certain relationship that I have in my life. And I like to help people who want to help themselves. I don't know if you guys have ever thought that. Giving money to someone who's just going to waste it and I don't know, it just doesn't feel right to me. So I like to help people who are going to help themselves. I have, we'll say, a sibling that no matter how much you help her, she's always in the back in the same position, right? So anyways, that's my personal thing. I don't mind adding value where I can, invest in their dreams, right? Education. As you get older and your kids start their own families, they're going to be grandkids, right? So lots of things you can do along the way as you um, I was going to say get older, but I'm going to say become more experienced. If you're experienced like Peter and I are experienced. Yeah, what about strengthening your relationships, right? Taking the work on some relationship building courses, actually retreats. There's couples retreats. My wife and I've been to many of those. Give back to your community. Like, these are all things that are important to you, right? Well, those you are all things that you can do with your well, when it comes to the relationships. Let's talk about finances. Now, some of you guys have debt. Credit card debt is probably the most expensive credit card, and student loans probably the most expensive debt you can have. Try to get those paid off as soon as you can. Obviously, $1 million. Hopefully, you don't have more than $1 million of credit card debt. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm not going to judge. Mortgages are in personal mortgages usually the lowest of the debts you could have. Personal loans, credit cards, those get up into the 18 to I've seen 24, 20. I don't even know what the legal limit is, but 24% interest. Obviously, those things can eat you alive if you're only making the minimum payment. So something to think about. What about setting up an emergency fund? Some of you guys know I live in Tennessee, home of Dave Ramsey. He recommends a $1,000 emergency fund. So maybe that's the first step. Maybe that's where you start. Obviously, $1,000 doesn't really in today's dollar doesn't go as far as it did 20 years ago, right? Obviously, invest in the stock market. I know some people who can help you with this. Real estate, same thing, can help there. Other wealth building opportunities, small businesses, all kinds of stuff to think through. And then maybe we want to create a comprehensive financial plan. Now, I am kind of a little bit judgmental when it comes to financial planners. Not a huge fan. A lot of times, mostly because a lot of people talk to them and want them to kind of help them with things that they're still ultimately responsible for. And so they're going to end up figuring out how they can get a piece of your pie, not do a whole lot for you, and then charge you ridiculous fees for not helping very much. So that's why I'm not a huge fan um, of professional, financial planners. It certainly doesn't hurt to have some conversations with those if you think that's the route you want to take. But keep in mind, you're still responsible for your own money. That's kind of how I even started trading. I had some money invested with a professional money manager, and I was getting a whopping, you ready for this, ladies and gentlemen, 4% a year. Woo! And on top of that, he was taking fees out of that, annual fees. And so I decided, you know what? If this is like the proper way to do it, I don't want anything to do with it. I have to figure this out myself. That's actually how I started trading years and years ago. So what about donating to charities, causes that are important to you, things you care about, right? Creating some savings plans, which if you have kids, there are things called ESAs, so education savings accounts. If they're under 18, there's also something called a 529 plan. So those, when my kids were younger, I couldn't decide which one I wanted for them, so I created one for each of them. So each of them had two accounts, and the idea is it's like a lockbox for education purposes only. And so my youngest decided not to go to college. My oldest went to college, and so we had money socked away in these plans. And every semester, we used those funds to write a check to the university where she went. Right, paid for books, tuition, housing, all the things. Right, so things again to think about. You don't have to have tons and tons of money to start these. A lot of these require like a $50, 50 to $100 minimum just to start. So most of you on this call can do that, kind of get that started and kicked off. Last idea here, last bullet would be the career in small business. Expand small business with no financial constraints. Well, we'll say $1 million financial constraints, probably what I should have. I actually used to work with, used to have a friend, and when you worked at his company after 5 years, 5 year mark, you were given a 1 month paid sabbatical, 4 weeks, and people would stay at that company 5 years just to get that. Like people would go to India for a month, people would go to the Caribbean, like South America, pick your favorite destination for a month. Now, most of you, the idea of that in your current financial state would probably stress you out. You're like, well, who's gonna take care of the pets and who's gonna watch the kids? And again, when you have a different financial outlook, it's pretty reasonable to make plans, figure that out, right? Professional development courses. I'm actually looking at a few things myself related to construction. I have some ideas I want to do that I'll share with you guys later. Upgrade business equipment, workspace, right? Creative projects, writing a book, launching a product. I've only written one book, and it actually wasn't on life, it was on parenting, if you guys can believe that. Um, so I think some of you guys have read through that. And then also, maybe reduce your hours delegating tasks. Um, Things like maybe have someone cut your grass. You don't have to spend an hour or two every week. Have someone do that. Maybe clean your house every week instead, right? There's lots of things you can do when you start thinking about it in kind of a different context. So really what we're gonna do is let's go to this right here. Oops. We're going to, sorry, go back. This is a printout sheet. I'll create a little PDF of this. This is kind of what I want you guys to think about. This is going to be your homework. Can you start filling in, spend some time on each of these, thinking about when it comes to health and lifestyle? What are some things you want to change? What would you change? Again, we're starting back with that original question. You had $1 million in your bank account. What would change? What would you do different? And we're framing it in that light on purpose because you can very much be intentional when you have a little bit of direction, right? And the reason I'm saying all this, ladies and gentlemen, is no one accidentally sets a world record. No one accidentally climbs Mount Everest. No one accidentally writes a book. No one accidentally completes an Ironman. Why? It's all very, very, very intentional. So, in order to do that, you got to get clear on what you want. Every day you're working towards something. What is that something? Every week, every month, right? And the most, I would say, the saddest thing I've ever seen is maybe you meet someone 10, 20 years later, they're like a family reunion, they're in the same exact place than they were 10, 20 years ago. Like they're just 20 years older, but they're still complaining about their job, still complaining about their neighborhood, still complaining. Um, I call those stuck people. They're still stuck, right, where they were 10, 20 years ago. So finances, career, small business. And if some of you guys want to take a screenshot, I'll stay here for just a sec. If you want to take a screenshot of that, if you woke up tomorrow, and this is going to be your homework, of course, I want you guys to spend time on this. Now, ideally, what you would do is you'd start with bullet points, right? Start with a bullet point. Think about some things you want to do in the next, we'll say up to next 1 to 5 years. Again, January is a few weeks away. And it's pretty crazy because I could have swore January is just a few weeks ago. And here we are in December at the tail end of the year. Pretty crazy. Things went by so quick. Golly, man, like slow it down, right? So start with a bullet point, and maybe if you're able to get some clarity around it, create it into a paragraph. We'll talk about why you have to get clear, why in our next class, and some things that might be holding you back. Let's see. But that is your homework, is to expand your bullet points to paragraphs for each of these. And that is what I have for you guys tonight. Our next class is same time, same place next week. And we're going to talk about aligning your habits, the thing, but you got to get clear on what you want first, right? We're going to talk about those bullet points for each of these. We're going to create some paragraphs from them, right? Spalana, you want to go visit Russia? Have you ever taken the kids to Russia? That'd be interesting. All right, ladies and gentlemen, any questions for me? You guys clear on your homework? Any questions? Go ahead and unmute or throw it in the chat. I'll hang out for a few minutes. What do you guys think? Is this something you guys can complete? Tim, we got two Tims. Nick, yeah, my pleasure. We got Max, John, Kyle, Nick, Pete, Corey, Cindy, Chris, Cassie. Awesome. So again, homework is to get clear. If I can go back. Let's see. There you go. Homework is get clear on what you want on these areas. And please, if you haven't yet, go ahead and like look at your calendar. Everyone can open up their calendar real quick and look at, can you allocate half an hour to an hour, maybe one or two of those between now and the next week? Most of you guys have some time, maybe this weekend, maybe tomorrow. Do not wait till next Thursday to start working on this because you're going to need some kind of something to start with to get into our next exercise. And I'm going to show you guys some cool ideas on how to get a little bit more clear on what you want. And again, some of you guys are just kind of snapping out of survival mode. So this might be a little uncomfortable. It might be a little awkward at first, but trust me, we're going to connect the dots and we're going to ultimately on our last class, we're going to have a actual template I'll share with you guys to plug in kind of what you're looking for and kind of work backwards and think about it in the context of the next year or next 90 days, like what you want to achieve. Make sense? All right. Any final questions? Any thoughts? Otherwise, we will wrap up and we will see you same time, same place next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, guys. Yep.